Hey everyone, Alex Trades here, and I am back with another book club, and the book club for this month is Horrorstor by Grady Hendrix. There's actually supposed to be, like, what is it called? An umlaut over the last O in the title, but I don't know how to make that happen on my computer keyboards, so I'm not doing it. The next month's book club is November 22nd at 3 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. I know something happens with daylight savings time between now and then, but I live in Arizona where we don't fuck with that, so I'm actually not entirely certain what that means. Maybe it means that I'm no longer on Pacific time? I'm not actually sure. But it's 3 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and the book is going to be Gridlinked, that's all one word, by Neal Asher. Neal Asher is a UK sort of indie sci-fi author. So if you like sci-fi and you like indie authors and cats, you can read that book and you can join us for the live stream. Neal Asher is pretty active on like social media, X and Facebook, so you can see his opinions out there, and they're pretty awesome and based. Just if you want to be on that live stream, all you have to do is read the book and you contact me and you can be on the live stream. Just put it on your calendars. And also below in the description, I gave the list for the next 12 months. I actually really thought about it over the last week and decided on all the books for the next 12 months. So not a full calendar year, but one of the reasons why is because I want to do House of Leaves in October next year, which is like my favorite novel. But I feel like I need to give people time on that one because it's not, it's a pretty complex read. So, but it's October, so we're doing horror, obviously, and I picked Horrorstor. This is the second novel by Grady Hendrix that I have read, the first one being the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, which I have a pretty long review of that out there. I can't remember if it's text or video, but it is somewhere around my review of that novel. And that novel really made me, thanks for walking on the keyboard, Lily, feel a lot. Like I really felt connected to the story, pretty strongly. And I did not get that feeling from Horrorstor, unfortunately. That's what I was kind of hoping for. And my friend Nameless has read, what's it called? We Sold Our Souls by Grady Hendrix. And I realized, and he does not have a high opinion of that novel, by the way. And I realized an issue with Grady Hendrix, and I'm not the only one who feels this way. I've seen readers talk about it, is that he comes up with these like brilliant, excellent freaking premises, and then the follow through, the execution is never quite what you wanted from the premise. And that's kind of how I feel about Horrorstor as well. One of my biggest complaints about the first novel I read by him, the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, is that that title suggests something completely different than what the novel actually is. In the novel, there's one vampire, and what I expect from that title, though, is a bunch of vampires and the book club going around and killing a bunch of vampires, like, oh no, there's vampires here. And then these people get together and they decide to start slaying them. That is not what the story is at all. And often that is the problem. We sold our souls, apparently, the idea being it's, like Tommy Johnson, Robert Johnson kind of idea of musicians selling their souls. But apparently it's supposed to be a mystery what happened that night. And it's like, well, it's kind of in the title. If it's not much of a mystery at that point. But it's also the issue with Horrorstor. Horrorstor is this idea that it's like a haunting in a big box store. And there were two things that I thought this book was going to be that they were not. One, that the whole thing was going to look like a catalog in a etymological way of presenting fiction, which I love. That's anybody who knows me knows that's like my favorite thing. Like if there's an idea of presenting fiction in a weird way, presenting a story in a strange and interesting way, I want to read it. So that's what attracted me to this, is that I thought it was going to be like a catalog. There are catalog elements in it, but that is sadly not what is happening in this novel. Once you get past some pages, it's just prose. There's just prose fiction. And that was disappointing, but I was like, okay, fine. That's it. Like the catalog elements are still interesting and cool. The other thing, though, is that pretty early on, there's this idea that the store is built on top of a panopticon prison that used to be there like 100 years ago or more. And I'm like, oh, a panopticon, that's really cool. Like, it presents this idea like in the first act, essentially, of the story. And none of the panopticon elements that you would expect end up inside the novel. And I was like, well, and especially considering the fact that, like the idea of commercial surveillance, that there would be security cameras everywhere and everything. There's none of that in this novel. And I was like, okay, so neither of these things are actually shown to me or are used in a way that I would want. So I get, it's really strange to me that those two, honestly, they could have completely dropped the idea of panopticon entirely, and it wouldn't have changed anything. Not like from a thematic point, from a plot point, it means nothing. And so he basically never should have even brought up panopticon. Sorry, her tail is like slapping my keyboard. But so that was a disappointment. Like, don't even bring up panopticons if you're not really going to like delve into that, especially from the idea of surveillance, which we're so used to in commercial spaces. It's just not there. So a big issue with Grady Hendrix' work and why he keeps getting published, but people keep feeling somewhat about him, is that he comes up with these absolutely brilliant ideas, just so good, which sell books. The premise alone will sell the novels. And then the execution is sort of like, this one is actually, I would say, not as good as the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, which I wish had a shorter title, honestly. But it's just, like I said, I didn't connect to it as much. It's a much shorter novel, and I feel like it could have been a lot longer. I'm not the only person who feels this way, that he could have delved deeper into some of the characters. It would gone deeper, spent more time in the actual horror elements, because it's funny, because the first few chapters are pretty awesome. Like they're sort of like acerbic and everything. Like there's some laughs there and everything, but then and like there's like very minor supernatural elements at the beginning of the novel, like people receiving text messages from an unknown number that says help, and that's all it says. Anyone in the store receives these text messages, which is pretty interesting. And then as like time goes on, every night they find some of the stuff in the store has been vandalized or destroyed in some way, and they're just not sure what's causing it. God, Lily is trying to knock over my drink. But the issue is that like then like the most interesting elements all happen in the beginning of the novel, honestly. Like, for example, when they're in the store in the middle of the night, and two of the characters, Matt and Trinity, they want to do one of those ghost hunter shows. So they have all this equipment, EMP readers, cameras, and stuff like that. And our main character, Amy, and Matt are walking around in the store, and the store is built just like an IKEA. Yeah, I know. It's because the camera is designed for when it's dark in here, and it's the afternoon. So, and it's Arizona. Even in wintertime, we get tons of sunlight. And I don't bother to adjust the camera every fucking time I do stuff in the middle of the day instead of at night. That's really what it is. But so Matt and Amy are walking around the store, and they keep getting lost in the like IKEA like maze, and they're like they keep getting confused by it. And then Matt realizes that the camera this is displaying, "You're a ghost, it's okay." Yeah, that works for horror for this month. So Matt realizes that the camera is showing a completely different part of the store than what they are seeing with their eyes. And he discusses whether or not that means something is happening to their brains or happening to the camera. It's like unclear, but something is going on, obviously. And they actually end up using the camera to navigate the store. And basically, the other like minor creepy thing that happens is that there's more and more graffiti in the bathroom, and it's like it says beehive, it says a person's name, and it says a few, like some time, usually measured in years, and sometimes it's crossed out and it's more time. So those are all the like interesting creepy elements at the beginning of the novel. And then they have a seance, and from that point forward, everything, it just like we're getting like this slow buildup of supernatural stuff, and then once the seance happens, it's like skyrockets straight up, and the idea there being like, oh my god, that pacing is just jarring as fuck, and I'm not expecting it. Now, there's a point at which, when they're walking around, Matt and Amy, that's when he explains about the idea of the panopticon, and he says something about how it was built that way because that's when they believed that architecture still had a psychological effect on people. And in the same conversation, they're talking about how Orsk, that's the name of the store brand, builds things in such a way to disorient people in the store. And I was like, and they buy that premise that it actually does disorient people, and that phrasing though, used to believe. And I was like, it seems to me that you know for a fact that architecture can in fact produce a psychological effect. So I don't understand why you said used to believe. And that's the thing too, is that the idea of the store being a maze is only really used then, and like barely throughout the rest of the story, and that bothered me so much because I was like, you could so use that like hardcore. Like honestly, the horror elements in the later half when it's Josiah Worth, our lead villain ghost, and his torture of people, of the penitents, feels more like it would have worked better if the location was a hospital thematically, instead of a store. Now, if you think about IKEA, right, in this idea of the store. Now, I was sold on this book being an IKEA knockoff. The thing is, though, is that that's the in-universe description of Orsk, is that it is an IKEA knockoff. In the novel, in the world of the novel, IKEA exists, and Orsk is a knockoff of IKEA, and it's made by Americans. And I thought that was really funny because I was not expecting that, and I thought that was a good surprise, honestly, that IKEA really exists in the world of this novel. That they're not trying to say that IKEA is like this, although they're also kind of saying that. But everything is fake Swedish, and I thought that was so that's probably my favorite part about the whole store, is the idea that the names of all the products are like fake Swedish names. And they have the magic tool, which is sort of like an Allen wrench, but it's not. It has its own special like proprietary end, and that's how all their furniture is designed to be used with those things. And I can't even say the name of like any of the furniture, by the way. These fake words that are like Swedish like, it's just outside of the realm of my ability to say. I can't say those words. Now, there is a thing, and I will agree, I get lost in spaces. This is a thing about me specifically. I get lost in virtual spaces and real spaces. It's why I don't. One of the reasons why I don't like going places is because I'm like, where the fuck am I? Like, if I go into a store and it's not even designed to be confusing like an IKEA is, I'm still gonna get lost. So I'm my sense of direction is absolutely horrific. And so the idea of getting lost in a store is completely like normal to me. I'm like, I assume that most people don't get as lost as I get in stores. And which is why when I went to Phoenix Fan Fusion, especially the exhibitors hall, and well, actually it was the whole Phoenix Convention Center, which is 2 buildings, which made it worse. I just kept getting so confused. I was never quite clear what direction I was supposed to go ever, so I needed extra time between anywhere that I wanted to be in that place so that I could get there on time. Because I have a horrific sense of direction. Now, the thing is, though, is that I do believe there are legitimate commercial spaces that are designed specifically to make you lost. Now, I definitely think IKEA is like that, which is funny because I think to some extent there's a map of Orsk in the book that you can look at, but there is this idea, though, that like it should be simple, that you just go around. But it's not exactly like the spaces, the path and the spaces are walled in. Like it's not, they are semi-walled in, but there's all this extra space where all the display furniture is, right? I have been inside an IKEA. And so to me, I feel like that extra space with the furniture in it actually makes it more disorienting than it would be otherwise. In fact, if the walls started where the path ends instead of the extra space with the furniture, I think it would be less confusing. But that extra space adds to this level of disorientation. And I feel like the novel did a good job of making you question at the beginning of it. It's shaped like a Satan star. Whether or not the getting lost aspect was normal or or supernatural. So like Ruth Ann, one of the characters, said she got lost, like really, really lost in the store the first time she came to this location. So she doesn't like going around the actual showroom space because it makes her confused. Now we see Amy go through the store really early in the novel, and she moves like she knows exactly where she's going. It's no problem whatsoever for her at all. So I like she has a goal in mind of where she wants to be, and not only does she get there quickly, she gets there without taking the normal path. So she literally takes like shortcuts and knows exactly which direction to go. So I feel like this is the most brilliant part actually, is that we have her we have Amy get exactly where she wants to go very easily, very quickly, with no sense of being lost. And then later on, we have that scene with Matt where they keep getting turned around over and over and over again and ending up somewhere else. And I think that's, and she gets really scared. She's really worried that she's not going to get out of the store. And when her and Matt separate and she goes with Ruth Ann to go back to the employee break room, she is so scared that she's not going to make it out of the showroom floor. And I feel like those two scenes in this novel, and like I said, that's like the first half, are just brilliant. That part is so well done, and I wish we could have gotten more of that, because post seance, it's almost entirely just like normal horror like haunting stuff. Like thinking about the if I wanted to name some movies, The Haunting of Hill House, like any the Asylum episode of Supernatural. Like just think about any, like the entire season of Asylum of American Horror Story. Basically, that's why I say it feels more like like this should take place at a hospital in the second half than it should take place in a store, because it just, the themes are all focused on curing people. That's what Josiah Worth says he's going to do. I'm going to cure you. I need more than one night to cure you and everything. And he's like, oh, these treatments are going to cure you. They're tortures. Maybe he truly did believe when he was alive that these were curing agents, in the same way that a lot of people believed that like really horrific things were actually going to cure people. But the problem is that applying that kind of theme to people who work in a like big box store just doesn't work. Like it doesn't relate as much. And that's why I was bothered by this so much, because and why I think a lot of people don't like where this novel ends up, is because after the seance, like I said, it skyrockets in its horror elements, but it's just, what is that movie called? 13 Ghosts. It's like 13 Ghosts too, where there's just a bunch of like little sequences of, we're going to, torture you in weird ways, but none of it relates back to the store elements. Like hardly ever do any of it relates back to the store elements. The closest we get is probably Trinity on the torture device that's like a treadmill. I feel like that's the closest we get to it relating. There is one thing though, I will say this. Amy gets put in this chair that she can't move at all, and it changes her like blood pressure, in fact, like to the point where her fingers feel like sausages and stuff, and she cannot move at all. It's terrible. And she was saying earlier in the book how she wanted a sit-down job versus a standing job, that standing jobs were lesser than sit-down jobs, and that standing desks seemed like a perversion of the idea of moving up in employment. So like that one like was, close to like issues with Amy specifically and her employment. But I don't know. I feel like there was a lot more that Grady Hendrix could have done to make the store and the horror elements like really mesh. So, because I didn't feel it with Ruth Ann. We didn't really see what happened with Matt. Basil, it wasn't really there either. Like, it's just, and then poor Carl. Carl, we don't like doesn't get tortured at all. Carl just gets killed. And I don't know. I was disappointed. I will admit that entirely. Yeah, that would have been nice. Is there any employees that randomly appear to help but don't exist? Like, that would have worked. I would have liked that. Hi, Winky. Disney Marvel movie horror. Is that, I think the closest that Disney Marvel came to horror was Doctor Strange and in the Multiverse of Madness. The title tells you that somewhat that it's supposed to be a reference to H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness, obviously. It was Carl Black. No, Basil was. So spoilers for the end of the novel. At the end of the novel, the only people that make it out are Amy and Basil. And it's the arc of what happens once, the seance goes horrifically wrong, is strange because, like, people go missing and then are found and then, like, somehow escape and then go back in the store. It's just, like, really complicated. And then Josiah Worth decides to do the same thing he did when he was alive, which is drown the penitents. So he literally starts flooding the store with water. Now, one of the things that was interesting was the idea that some of the fake doors actually opened into spaces, which is more interesting, but not, I think it could have been more explored. In fact, I think more of, if there had been more exploration of the maze spaces that should not have existed, yes, like House of Leaves, it would have been more associated with the disorienting factor of a IKEA knockoff, as opposed to the torture elements. I feel like those were just thematically not as interesting as the idea of these people getting lost in supernatural spaces. But so it's so weird that at one point Amy actually gets outside of the store and then decides to go back in to try to save others. And to me, that's so weird because so often the idea is that, like, no one ever even tries to leave in the horror, and she goes back in. And I would say that's actually probably one of the more interesting parts of the novel, because it's about her being brave. She literally makes a choice to go back into the store to try to save people who are not her friends, she claims. She doesn't even like Basil, and Basil's the one she ends up saving. It's really funny because she's stuck in the chair. She can't get out. Basil saves her. And then he gets taken and she runs away. And then, and that's the second time she ran away from Basil, by the way, and left him to his own devices. And then later on, she saves Basil from, like, he's all tied up. That's when she comes back into the store. And then like something happens and they both get like stuffed in cabinets, wardrobes. and then she saves him again, and and it's funny that like it just kept popping back and forth, and like I feel like that was maybe a little messy, honestly, that kept happening. But and Basil's so weird in that he at one point the part after he saves her, he decides to talk to the penitent ghosts like their customers, and it's like, dude, come on, man, like you know that these are not human beings, right? You can, like he's so weird about that, like he's so stuck in the idea that he's manager that he cannot like break out, and that was like his journey is supposed to be thematically about breaking out of that, obviously, and caring about things bigger than this, and that's kind of where the book goes at the end, is that it's about Basil and Amy no longer having the priorities about employment and having priorities about life and death, because they make it out alive and they get offered sit-down positions. Like I said, the theme of her being in a sit-down job at the regional office for Orsk. She refuses, like flat out, immediately refuses, because she knows they're going to cover it up, and the other three people are still in the store, and they were kind of acting like, because Matt and Trinity weren't on the clock, are they responsible? And it's like, well, they were on your property, and they were your employees. Just because they weren't on the clock, like, are you saying that if someone comes into the store because they forgot something as an employee, that you're not responsible if something happens to them? Kind of are. They're there because they work there, whether or not they're on the clock. To be fair to Orsk, Trinity and Matt broke in, so maybe then they could say they weren't responsible. But their argument wasn't that they broke in. It was that they weren't on the clock. And I was like, you could go ahead and argue that they broke in. That's more reasonable grounds. But so she's mad at Orsk because they're clearly going to abandon the other three employees that were in the store, and the text messages keep happening, and she realizes that the recent text message that says help is from Matt. Months go by, and she decides to get, and Orsk has sold off this location. They're like, this location is a disaster, and they had to write off all the merchandise in the store because it flooded. And I was sort of like, why did Josiah Worth and the penitents decide to go hog wild that night? Is it because there were 6 extra people in the store at night? Like, we don't really get an answer to that. That's the only thing that kind of makes sense to me. Although if the idea is that Matt is sending the help messages at the end, who was sending the help messages at the beginning? Because it wasn't Matt's phone number. Matt received them too. And so I'm sort of like, who was sending help messages? How are they sending help messages to people's cell phones? Is it just magic? Because they act like, because it's coming from Matt's cell phone at the end, that eventually his cell phone's going to run out of power. But so months go by, and now this store location is owned by Babies R Us, essentially. It's not really called that, just like it's Orsk and not IKEA. It's Babies R Us, but it's actually Baby World, I think. And so Amy gets a job there, and she doesn't talk to Basil because she's mad at him for abandoning the other 3 employees. And then when she gets a job at this Baby World and decides that she's going to go there in the middle of the night to try to save the other 3 if they're still alive. And it's like, they've been there for months. I mean, maybe it's like no time, but maybe they're dead and they're just ghosts there now. and I don't know that you can save them at that point. But then Basil shows up and he's going to help her, because that's why he refused the job at Orsk as well, and is now working for Baby World. So at the evil location to be able to save the other 3. And And it is definitely, it's about the idea that they both care about something bigger than employment. The crazy thing is, though, is that I don't know what kind of message that is, because if things are not life and death, employment does matter. If things are life and death, then employment is not that big a deal at that moment, right? But most of the time in the Western world, it's not life and death. It is like employment is probably one of your top concerns. So it's weird to me that that is the message. Like I'm okay with life and death being a like not a huge priority when it's not a priority, like when it's not a concern. There is no, like, the chances of you being in a life and death situation are actually pretty low in the Western developed world. It's just that's true. And also the chances of you dying like young is not from violence so much as it is incompetence. And I say that because I've been watching way too many videos about people's incompetence getting people killed lately. But it does seem like that is like more likely to be the issue. And I was like, yeah, that's true, because like you get killed in a car accident, it's because someone was fucking up. It's not usually malicious, it's incompetence. So to me, I'm sort of like, as a horror story about, I suppose, being a retail worker, I'm not sure that thematically by the end that I'm on board with what Grady Hendrix is trying to sell me, beyond the idea that I'm kind of upset that he let the commercial retail big box store thing sort of fall apart in the third act. So incontinence is bad too. True, awesome one. Very true. I wish the store got pulled into hell at the end or something. It got flooded, which, by the way, I was kind of upset by that from a perspective of, hey, because before I read this novel, long before I read this novel, at least maybe like 6 months ago, I had a nightmare about an office building being flooded on like every level, and it being supernatural. And I was like, screw you. It's the same idea, only not entirely. There were no ghosts in mine, and it was an office building, not a commercial like space. But still, it was like, oh. But I guess that's and no, I've not seen the Poseidon Adventure, I think it's called. I've heard of it, but I've not seen it. I don't know what it's about. But yeah, it gets flooded, and there's tons of rats in the building, and I've never been clear if the rats are supernatural or just natural. Are they in the building just because it's shelter? It's totally possible that the rats are just there because they, have shelter. Just watched Mega Tsunami video before this. Yeah, drowning is terrifying, I would say. Especially drowning when there's a ceiling above you. Like the idea is horrifying, and that's essentially what the final thing is for Amy and Basil at the end. But I did not think this book was as good as it could have been. I feel like maybe 2 or 3 more drafts, maybe some different concepts. Overall, the idea of associating a big box store with a panopticon torture prison about curing people just didn't really work for me. I just didn't think it was that great. So I'm actually glad that my next October book is one that I've read twice that I absolutely love. House of Leaves is amazing. But next month's book club is going to be Neal Asher's Gridlinked, which is sci-fi. The only reason why I didn't do it immediately upon deciding on doing Gridlinked is that I was like, I don't want to do 3 sci-fi novels in a row. Because I did Ender's Game and the 3-body problem, and I was like, I can't do Gridlinked next. So I did the Maltese Falcon and then Horrorstor. The actual next, you think The Simpsons did big box horror better? Oh, I've not seen that episode. I wonder. Let's see. The next horror book is going to be in March, and it's called Horror Movie by Paul Tremblay. Now, if you've not heard of Paul Tremblay, you may have heard of the movie by M. Night Shyamalan. What is it called? It's like Knock at the Cabin, I think. I think that's what it's. Let me look it up. I just want to be certain. Yeah, Knock at the Cabin, starring Dave Bautista. That's based on a Paul Tremblay story. No, Ender's Game is a novel, awesome one. And he said he wrote Ender's Game just so he could write Speaker for the Dead, actually, which I've heard is a better novel than Ender's Game, which is impressive because Ender's Game is not bad. Like, it's a pretty decent novel. There's parts about it that I don't like, but I think I like it better than Horrorstor, honestly. But Knock at the Cabin, the story behind that movie is by Paul Tremblay, and I've actually read Paul Tremblay's collection of short stories called Growing Things, I think it's called. And he really likes apocalypse stories. Like, that's one of his favorite things is apocalypse ideas. So some of it's pseudo sci-fi sometimes, but I'm going to give Horror Movie a chance because it's sort of based on the idea of The Ring, and it kind of does remind me premise-wise of House of Leaves, because House of Leaves is somewhat based on the idea of a fake horror documentary like the Blair Witch Project, only in a house, obviously House of Leaves. But I'm interested to read more Paul Tremblay, so that's why he's going to be my next horror novel for this book club. And again, if you want to be on book club, you totally can. Instead of just listening to me talk for 45 minutes, you can be part of it, and it can be an hour and a half long because we can discuss things instead. All right. Well, let me go over schedule and stuff. We're still in the smack dab end of Spooktober. I have a week left of Spooktober. The next Spooktober live stream on Alice's Book Circle is tonight, and we're on to Resident Evil 3 with 10 deaths. And I think I'm at the end of the video game. I'm pretty sure I'm at the final boss fight with Nemesis. And then tomorrow is Claire Obscure Expedition 33 live stream for exclusive people. And then there's if you want more horror stuff, tomorrow night on the Dim side on Rumble is the Dim stream. And we are talking about Saw 2, Blood-Sucking Bastards, and Cursed Friends. And then Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, there is a Spooktober every night. I'm going to have to show the Claire Obscure on Wednesday at noon, I just realized. And then Thursday, there should be a couple of Spooktobers. I don't know if we're doing the Dim stream yet. And then Friday is Halloween. There's going to be a couple of Spooktobers and the Dim news on the Dim side on Rumble. That's the schedule for the week. In the links below, there's a link to buy my novel, a link to tip me, a link to join my Discord, a link to my locals, where you can, if you become a paying member, you get access to exclusive stuff, like the exclusive live streams that happen on Sundays, plus exclusive stuff only available on locals. There's also a link to the gaming channel, Alex of All Trades, if you want to watch the Spooktober stuff. And that is everything. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and I will see you next time.